I've got a little bit of an interview with a friend of mine that I met here in Peru that has an extensive background in permaculture and has a doctor's background, and somebody that I'm going to be working with out here in Peru when I'm talking about some of the plans that I have and Iquitos, about developing some of my land out there. Been looking at permaculture ideas. I've been looking at some different ways to expand some of the things on what I'm doing, and you know, there's some really interesting ideas, you know, that we've talked about. And so I'll give you guys a little bit of a background. Bo here, Crypto Bo, we're trying to get him into crypto, but has a light background. I'm going to be teaching him some more about some of the things that you know, that we can offer in terms of like my experience and that sort of thing. But you know, you bought Ethereum, what was it, back in about a year ago or so?
Yeah, about last summer.
Yeah.
And Chainlink, I looked into how important the smart contracts was, and the independent oracles, how to get off-chain data to on-chain, and vice versa actually too. You know, how to synchronize the two spaces, and how we can make so the system is trustworthy in itself, so you don't have to give it that extra trust. It's like you trust less.
Sure.
So, so I mean, I wanted to support this decentralized outroll of a new infrastructure where we have more independence from the corrupt bank system, basically, right? Because that's where many of the threats they line up. Is that health and propaganda and bank business, centralized business, is one of what I see as the major threats at the moment for humankind, basically.
Yeah.
So I
hope
mean,
you guys can hear us okay.
Yeah, so it's from my standpoint, I'm a doctor from the Scandinavian countries. I don't want to be more specific at the moment, but as we get to know each other more, and I might come more online with these kind of topics, I might just reveal a bit more about myself. But I do have the documents from my government when I started getting severely into what's going on at the moment. Was when I made a job application during the COVID lockdown in Scandinavia. And I did it because I had like a job insurance. If you're out of job as a doctor, you get some money in on as long as you keep applying for a new job. So I thought, well, they took it away in the middle of the pandemic, this kind of money support for me, because they didn't think I applied not enough job applications. And it was actually because I took my time to think of really important, what kind of job should I really be supporting at this time. Certainly not a job that forces you to violate other people's integrity, right? And if it's not under an informed consent to the knowledge that you know is reachable, I don't feel that the oath is fulfilled.
Sure.
So I mean, in that kind of situation, I forced myself not to waste my time, and also wanted to write to a department that I thought I could share some valuable knowledge with. So the radiologist department already had like a free spot out there. I took their article and I wrote back to them with a job application, and there I mentioned what I've been measuring over the last 5 years is a background rise in radar and microwave frequencies. This is a tri-band mode meter from 100 megahertz to 8 gigahertz it can measure. But it has like different antennas in it, and this is all made for frequencies that are harmful to biological life, including us. And so you have to remember, of course, that everything is frequency already. Healthy cells has healthy frequencies, but since I measured last 3 years, 2 years especially, the background radiation has risen dramatically in all populated areas that I visited around the globe. no exceptions really.
Yeah.
And I know that many people are experiencing the symptoms of radiation.
Yeah.
And that is non-ionized radiation. If you put your testicles into a low radiated microwave facility, even though you don't feel the heat so much, you will still experience the damage. So I mean, beside of this, I mentioned in this job application also that there is interaction between certain metals and certain electromagnetic frequencies. So as we know it with aluminum foil and a microwave oven, so there is radar and aluminum interaction. So if you have aluminum accumulation in the body, then you will also be more vulnerable to exposure to radar frequencies.
Yeah.
And like I explained it very casual. We know this in the medical field from MR scanners and their interaction with iron. So there you have a good example of how we already are very familiar with the interaction between certain specific metals to certain specific electromagnetic frequencies.
Yeah.
So that it should be such a surprise, it's pretty crazy. I also mentioned that we can use the knowledge of cymatics to strengthen the healthy frequencies of cells and actually use bioresonance therapy instead of just harmful frequencies to tumors and stuff.
Yeah.
Besides that, I acknowledge that the field has an important role. Of course, it has and always has in diagnostics and so forth. But they didn't like this application, and so they reported me to the Institute of Patient Security in my country, and they acknowledged also that all the evidence I had for my claims there were nothing wrong with them, but they saw it primarily as a political issue that I was addressing these things, and so didn't want to look into the science of it. So they weighted the political issue higher, and ever since they have been harassing me because of this application. And after I left for Peru, I did that just after they got me to a psychiatric consultation, and I was forced to go there. If I said no, they would take away my license. And they gave me only 5 days to meet up to this, and if I tried to change it, they would also take away my license. So I was forced to this examination, and I was there for 2 hours. I also had a person filming it, and a partner representative who was an engineer who could defend if anything came up about the science behind it. But they cleared me on the science behalf in the Institute of Patient Security already, saying that there was nothing wrong with my evidence for what I claimed, and I didn't have any bad practice in my history. So they just thought it was a very unusual. Maybe I felt depressed. Maybe we should just make sure that you are okay. Right? And so they got me to this psychiatric, and they found nothing on me. After 2 hours of examination. And then what happened was I went to Peru, and then a month later I received a new message that now they weren't so sure. Now they wanted me to another psychiatric, and if I tried to change that date or couldn't meet up for that date, they would take away my license. So that's what has happened. But basically just because of that one job application, and where I in it mentioned once the 4G and 5G installations over the last few years, and how I've been deliberately seeing the background radiation primarily in public areas, and not that, I mean, if I go into the forest, I can find like green, no radar radiation really, but still good 4G and good 3G connection, no internet trouble at all from your phone and mobile and device, but the frequencies will be all low. And so it's only when I get in and you have these modules pointing on buildings and stuff that you can start measuring it, actually going through the concrete outer walls of homes. And that's when I thought it should be a medical advice to look into these things and advise people.
Yeah, I'm going to be buying one of these. Like I'm really interested in trying to understand more about electromagnetic radiation, just because of I mean, I've got batteries everywhere,
you've been
computers.
feeling it.
Oh
You've
yeah,
been feeling it.
yeah. I've been feeling it, especially in certain places that I've been staying, and it's like it's hard to. It's not really something you can describe, but it's kind of like a low hanging headache or
fatigue.
Yeah, fatigue.
And bad sleep,
Sure.
stomach aches
Yeah.
can happen. It depends also on the frequencies that you're exposed to. It turns out that there might be more in play than just. I mean, many people, they think that these frequencies, they are there for a better signal. But as I just told you, I can stay in a forest where there is no background radiation, basically, and you still have perfect connection. So it turns out that these frequencies are used for scanning. So they can use this to scan homes, just as you would use military radar equipment to scan areas and facilities. Right? And so basically, also if you are uploaded in your body with aluminum and titanium and stuff like this, it will light up more in the scanning. And so of course, if you have a mobile home active too, it'll constantly know where you are.
So one of the ideas that I have with like the land that I'm developing out in Peru is to have a very low, electromagnetic, radiation like footprint.
Yeah, good green zone.
Yeah, somewhere to kind of get away from things. So one of the things I'm looking to do, and I'm going to be doing more shaman services. So I've talked about ayahuasca, San Pedro, combo, mushrooms. I mean, one of the things I'm really interested in doing a lot of different mushrooms, a lot of gardening. I've got quite a bit of land out there right now, about 30 acres, but I'm looking to expand it to, maybe about 90 or 100 acres. And there's some really cool things I can do out there. And that was like when we were having this conversation before. There was like really cool things you were talking about, kind of like almost having like cable structures with connected to some of the trees and having them connected, because so I like my land. I went out and I paid about a dozen guys to clear out a section of the property. They just cut up the underbrush, left all the big trees, and there are some amazing big trees. Because what's really cool about the land that I bought is it's essentially old growth forest.
That's awesome.
And it's just pure jungle. And you go out there and they cleared out just a 1-by-1 section. You have these really cool old trees and a lot of smaller ones, maybe with trunks about that yay big, and some of those I'll probably be clearing out some space.
But that's so important, yes, to keep those big trees.
The big
there.
ones. I'm keeping
very important.
The big ones. I mean, I'm interested to kind of like do some different things. Like they have a really cool. It's like a. I don't know if it's a resort or like a hotel system, but it's like in the treetops.
Yeah.
And like they'll have the trunk of the tree, and then they'll have kind of like the apartment or the hotel wrapped around the tree.
Yes.
And with mosquito netting and everything, and I think that would be really cool to do.
Yes.
Because I talk about on this channel about different ways to earn in cryptocurrency, and I think one of the things that you want to look at is for different ways to kind of cash out and diversify and get into some other projects outside of crypto. And this is going to be a big venture for me. And the permaculture angle is one that I'm really interested in, along with some of the development, with those older trees, cabling systems.
Yeah.
I think we can do a lot of cool stuff.
And what inspired me when I was in the jungle there, and I was like listening to all the birds and had all this extra time on my hands, and I was watching these big trees in between it all, right? And I was like, okay, so all the mammals that ever chose to live in the forest, they always choose to sleep up there if they don't dig like a cave or something.
Yeah.
And so they would choose to never stay on the surface in the forest at night. So why are humans the only, and especially the one thing that is really troubling when you are needing to do stuff in the jungle, it's the time window that you have, right? There is like in the morning you can work after light it comes in, and then when it becomes too hot, you almost like can't do it, right?
Yeah,
and
it's hot in the jungle.
And then in the evening you have a little time window again before the mosquitoes come.
Yeah.
And so the mosquitoes is also a big challenge for people to get stuff done in the jungle. Mm-hmm. And I believe that living up in the trees will create so much more comfort and get rid of these lower level insects.
Yeah.
So I mean that there's so many levels to it, but how can we? And you can also see how you can build up like hanging gardens along with the trees if you stabilize them. So you help the integrity to stay together for the tree, and then you can also give it a bigger load.
When you say hanging gardens, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, for example, if we have like 3 great old trees,
Okay.
and they are higher like most of the trees, right? So there is like a standard level of trees, like somewhere between what an apple tree is usually forming and what a walnut tree can become. You know, like that's usually the range of a tree size. But some of these old rainforest trees can get enormously high, right? But the interesting factor is like from where a walnut tree is and to where these old trees are, you know, that kind of height. If you build plateaus up in the corona, and you then create like a steel wiring to the surrounding 2 trees or more, you can of course create a center platform around that. And then you can also, from the side of that, you can anchor some with wires that then go down to like the root part of the trees that are longer apart, and so you can stabilize that whole plateau. When you have these few wires into place, you start enforcing it with the living environment around it. So you take whatever grows next to it and you start curling it around these wires, these things that you place in, that you came in with. Then you start enforcing them with the living habitat around it. So like if you use, if you peel off some of the lianas from the trees that you have now connected with wires, you can of course make a hanging bridge between them. But the wires, you can start circulating or creating this, how do you say, weaving kind of technology, right? And you can start like folding the living habitat around the structures. And the same with the corona of the tree, the whole.
I don't know that I understand the different levels.
The sticks, the leaves. When you have like the stem, the big trunk, and then here when it starts to go up into like 3 or 4 different, it's a good place to have like a main plateau. But it's also where you can like overweight the tree if you don't support it to the other trees. Mm-hmm. So I mean, and of course there's different ways of supporting, but the interesting thing is if you between some of them, of the ones who you can use like a few steel wires, and then you can use some heavy hemp rope, whatever, and those heavy hemp rope, you start of course securing that with the lianas and stuff right away, so at some point when that deteriorates, it will at point, like 10 years or something, right, the hemp rope is gone, and you will have the natural around it. And I mean, there is examples from a different place of the planet where there's like living bridges, where you have a garden to take care of a bridge, and it goes through generations. The only thing you have to just make it comfortable to walk. Basically, the whole thing is living. And they started meeting it up from the 2 big different sides, right? Mm-hmm. And it starts to world up. So I mean, and then when you start to structure it all like that, and you also, so you for example make a basket kind of a hub, a room house, and then you can make different up in the different trunks. And then the leaves and the sticks of the tree, you can start like welding that around as a roof, so you have that extra build up. So you use everything, so you want to keep as much alive as there is, but by bending it and welding it together. And so you can also like use the lianas, and you can hang like, so you can grow strawberries and herbs and other kind of things from the trees. And so in that way you use the light, because what most people miss out in the farming culture of the countries we come from normally is that you go with a monoculture, and then because that really exploits the ground, then you change. So after some month, then you grow something different, and then that why you call it like not monoculture, but it is really monoculture because you grow nothing at the time. So a very important thing is how do we mix the right herbs and plants together that are eatable and that are very healthy, that we can make medicine and extracts out of, and then how do we support and strengthen that synergy that is between them, because the more of a monoculture they have, the more of a growing ground of an opportunistic disease you also have. that's one of the most known things, right? The Rothschild needed rubber for the Second World War, and so they started growing all these rubber plantations here in the rainforest, and they got all these diseases and make like a natural catastrophe.
Because of the overabundance of rubber trees?
Yeah, in one spot.
Yeah.
Because then an infectious disease might see that, like, that's how you also get a lot of grasshoppers, right? You have a lot of monoculture with the same kind of stuff on it, and then you create an overabundance for a certain eater of that stuff, right? So I mean, the lecture is supposed to have been learned for a long time ago, but like since we still struggle in culture and the destruction that it makes, I mean, most of the farming ground for monoculture is a becoming desert. You know, like that's really what you see also in Google Maps. You can look at most of the European countries, and you will see like 5-year-old pictures are showing like desert coming up of the ground. Like places that were known for good, great soil are now showing up with sand all over.
Yeah, that's a question that I'm wondering about is the soil, because one of the things I noticed when I was out on my land is that, like, because you got to understand, like, my land's right next to the Amazon River, and so there's a certain kind of buffer area, but once you get into my part of the land, you have a lot of these trees, and you kind of have like root structures that kind of come into the ground, but there's really no soil, at least that I've seen out there. There's a lot of kind of like
Clay.
Yeah.
And sand. Maybe.
Yeah, I wouldn't say sand. I didn't see as much, maybe more towards the water. Yeah, there's like clay, but it I don't know, it's kind of strange because it's like, you know, if I wanted to do some gardening, I'm gonna have to bring in perhaps my own soil, you know, from outside and kind of like do some work. That's
Or just all the plant material that has been cut down.
Sure.
If you bring that together to the areas you want to plant on first, you're already going to have a compost going.
Yeah.
Because it's so. But yes, how do you build up the ground? Because what we have to remember is basically that beneath the Amazon rainforest, you got a Sahara desert. And we have also a lot of evidence pointing.
So I don't understand. Why would you say that? Are you saying there's like a lack of nutrients or something? Or?
No, it's simply because the entire forest is standing on around 20 centimeters of good soil.
Okay.
That is on top of the desert.
Okay. Why is it?
Desert land, like for example.
So you're saying there's not much activity or life that's going on, like on the lower layers of the soil in the Amazon?
I mean, there is until you get to. I mean, a lot of activity is happening, and then you get below this, and then not a lot of activities.
Compared to other areas?
Yeah, it's like almost like it's a sand bay. Some people say that the Sahara Desert was once a rainforest. Because it entraps the vapor, so the vapor comes back down, So I mean, what will happen very easily with the rainforest if it's not changed to synergetic, diversified perma-gardening, is that you will end up with having a Sahara Desert here. What also can happen with the deserts we have around is that we start to build up this soil again. So at some point, some trees can get up, and when the trees can get up, then you really can start to protect the water from vaporizing completely from the air. I also noticed, like back then, like probably many of the viewers knows the natural northern climate plants, right? Where we have strawberries and these kind of things too. What I realized, like, you know, gooseberries.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for example, in my garden, I have like an old apple tree, and then underneath it, I have a lot of gooseberries and a lot of what we call these different berry bushes. You know, also what do you call that?
Blackberries?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And like blackberries, and then underneath that I have strawberries. And it turns out that all three layers, it gives a lot of apples, it gives hell of a lot of berries and bushes on it, and then even the strawberries under the bushes, gives something. That's 3 layers in one.
How do you deal with like pests or things that might be like coming in and like eating, you know, the fruit or whatever? Because I guess in traditional farming, you know, you're going to have.
For example, I have a lot of snails.
Okay.
I don't know the term you call it. We call them running dogs or ducks, you know, or like the rap dogs.
Ducks?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then muscus ducks. You know those? Muscus.
No.
Well,
This is a type of duck, I guess.
Yeah. There is also you also chickens are important to remove some of the insects and stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean that you have some of these also their shit are very important for the plants. So they cultivate the microflora of the ground.
Mm.
So having like for example a little guinea pig, and some ducks if they have some birds around them are really great for a certain type of like snails or insects or something you trouble with. I mean, at least it's well known in most countries. And you know the chickens comes from it, right? The most common chickens that we use, the rainbow chickens with the different colors and brown and reddish, you know.
Yeah.
Those comes classically from the rainforest. So you of course, and then there is this. I mean, the more shadow that you have from the trees, the less aggressive the ground growing is going to be. Because many people out there, if they just clear the entire ground, and they just have baking sun in the middle of an opening, I mean, there is so much trying to grow up that it almost like keeps each other down. Right? I mean, so I mean, keeping those big trees, first of all, you can use them for construction and stuff. Then in between those big trees, you start gradually growing up what you want to see later, like what do you call it, mango, avocado, nuts of different kinds, Brazilian nuts, castagna, you know, and different fruits, maybe apples if you can, and then in between those you have like the pineapples, you have the melon, you know.
Yeah.
And
I want to have as much variety as I can
exactly.
out there.
So the whole thing is kind of just to have like to plant those trees in enough separation from one another so you can have like the bushes close under, right? And then as you have these bigger trees, then you can start to like connect them and creating like first having plateaus here, maybe on different level.
Yeah, maybe show this to the camera so I can see kind of, I don't know how well that shows up.
It doesn't show probably that well, but like I'm talking about creating these hanging bridges in between them. You can create a larger plateau and then of course help fix some of these with an iron, not an iron, a steel wire or something.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is then that you can plant these bushes that you can harvest closer to those trees, create not enough sunlight in between. I mean, maybe this is like a grand. Then you can like grow, for example, a walnut tree here in the middle, and something out here and something out. And as time goes on, they get bigger. Then maybe at some day you can start bridging over to those, and maybe you will cut one of these, at least some down. And if it's up in the corona, you can easily keep the roots and growing stuff with them, but also like for bonfires.
I got to get you to explain this to some of the people that are going to be working out there, because I am going to be, so the first thing I'm doing is I'm putting what's called like a porta-camp, which is like a 10, what is it? It's like 10 feet by like 30 feet. So it's like a shipping container, and they turn it into a house. Like I just did a whole floor plan for it and everything.
I think that's pretty smart also, because you have this air conditioning and stuff.
Air conditioning,
and
hot shower,
you can take it with
desk.
You. Yes, and you can take it with you at some point.
Yeah.
You own it.
Yes.
No matter what happens.
And what's really good about the shipping containers, they have these like places you can hook,
Yeah.
like in the corners, and so like you can get a crane and you could hook up to it and you kind of move it around. Like that's how they get it out there.
No, you could even make it hanging between the three trees.
I don't know if it would support that kind of weight. You know, I mean, we might have to build something
No,
like.
but I'm saying if you imagine that this, like for example, this is if you imagine that this is the trunk of a tree, right?
Sure.
And then if you have the Ebola,
The what now?
in Spanish, the Ebola is called
Ebola, okay.
the corona, like up there where the trunk separates.
Okay.
It's the big. So
The
if
upper
you,
part of the tree.
Yeah. So if you take the upper part of the trunk with the wire, fixate it there, and then fasten it down in the lower trunk of a tree over here, it'll never fall that way. You see?
Yeah.
And so if you then have the weight for then use four trees, you know, and then hang it up in one tree fixated to another tree like this, those 4 trees can hold up your container, I mean, for sure. But yes, you do have to think these things through. And I mean, it's an interesting idea because how do we keep ourselves excited when you are living in harsh conditions? Because that's truly what it is. In the middle of the jungle, you don't come sleeping there, you won't survive.
Yeah. It's. I mean, there's a lot of villagers out there that they get by on very, very little.
But they also, especially if you're white-skinned, you know.
Yeah, they're not exposed to the elements in the same way, and the part of the village area, which is a little bit further from kind of where I'm at, it's somewhat developed. They don't have to deal with, say, like the mosquitoes, you know, the same way because it's fairly cleared out. Yeah, I'm going to be working a lot more with some of those people. I've started to make some connections there, which is great, and I have people that will work for me very inexpensively, you know, and I can start to build and develop and start to use some of the the income that I'm generating from these crypto profits, and like kind of like a long-term idea that I had was to create smart contracts or something, so when I have people that come out to the property, they're staying, as far as like, you know, wanting to do shaman services, jungle tours, all kinds of like exploration activity out in the Amazon. There's so much to do out there, but still having a escape, a place you can go where you get air conditioning, a hot shower, you have a desk, you have a kitchen, you have a nice bathroom, and you know, a nice comfortable bed that you can sleep in. Like it's gonna be
It's a lifesaver.
Yeah.
And I think for any big projects of this kind of stuff, it's the exact way to go about it, because you will drown in a big project in the corner if you don't have like a safe haven, a safe spot where you at least can make sure you have a good stable sleep.
Yeah.
And where you can have your focus.
And a little bit of an internet connection.
Yeah.
Like there's a spot in the northern part of my land that has about a 6 or 7 meg internet connection, which is enough to do YouTube videos. I can check my trades and everything. But the idea is that it's like an escape from trading, and all this technical stuff that I get into. You can go out there and just like, you know, be away from everything.
And that there's no doubt it's gonna be. I mean, there is a bridge being built from Brazil.
They're working on that.
And they are planning to be done with that in about 2 years from now.
We'll see about that, but,
We'll see
but they have a really big bridge that they built. I don't know how they get over the other section of there's another huge river, I don't know the name of it, that comes a little bit further downstream.
Yeah.
I don't know how they get over that.
Right.
That's like an even bigger river than the bridge they're building.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, the forces that are making this bridge is certainly looking to get it done at some point.
Sure.
And I'm just saying, there is a huge interest in the rainforest. The deforestation has accelerated, especially during the Biden period here. But I think also it happened on Trump's side. You know? But I mean, the deforestation is one of the parts of the Green New Deal. The more you destroy of it, the more exclusive it becomes. The more profit money becomes when you make things exclusive. You do that by destroying the rest.
Yeah.
And so it's gonna be like a lot of the world is gonna try to come here. If we don't have a culture, a sustainable culture that can live in harmony, it's just gonna bring more disease. basically that's what disease comes from. It comes from the word dissonance of ease. Right? It's funny how the word release. Some people, they need to release a lot of tension to feel ease. When they feel ease, they don't have this ease. It's funny how things are connected to frequencies, one way or the other. But one thing I want to make sure is that people, they recognize how important reishi mushroom is. Like, it's called Ganoderma lucidum. Here you have a turkey tail. It's called Trametes versicolor in Latin. And then you have, for example, the maitake. It's well known in Japan for its healing benefits. And then you have like the giant puffball. You know the puffballs, like it's those that when they are fully matured and you step on them, then a huge dust cloud comes up with a lot of spores from. You usually had them on football fields before they sprayed it all with pesticides, where you would suddenly have like this white ball growing out of the grass, and if you waited long enough, it would become like all puffy. You remember?
I don't know if that's something that was in my area, because I was in the Northwest in the U.S. I mean, there's a lot of, there's a lot of that there, but I'm interested in getting more involved with like mushroom spores and like soil and having some different ways to grow like all different genres and breeds.
And what I'm saying is the puffball is extremely great at the essential amino acids.
Okay.
So for example, most vegetarians they trouble with lacking knowledge of the mushroom kingdom, and that's because mushrooms, they breathe in oxygen and they breathe out CO2. So how much alike is that to ourselves?
How much? I'm sorry.
Alike.
Okay.
Our own cells is that.
Yeah.
It's very much alike.
Sure.
That's what we do ourselves. So when we have to find proteins and amino acids that supports our kingdom, the mushroom kingdom is a lot closer to us. That's also why we usually use yeast cells before we do any animal studies, because the yeast cells is an eukaryotic cell, and it does much of the same as our cells does. So I mean, when people are lacking with not enough essential amino acids, being a vegetarian, it's obviously because they're not integrated in the mushroom kingdom.
Yeah.
But it turns out that the most essential amino acid abundant in for example, the giant puffball that I spoke about, the big white one you sometimes see in football fields and stuff, at least the older fields. The most abundant essential amino acid is tryptophan. And tryptophan is actually the amino acid that we make our own serotonin in the brain with. And it's also how we make the other tryptamine groups like DNT, for example. When you spoke about ayahuasca, then one of the ingredients in the two-agent mix called ayahuasca is DNT. Right? Actually, it's the least rare one. The more rare one is the Mayo inhibitor. The Mayo inhibitor is the one we have in Syrian rule and in Kyber the liana.
Okay.
But that's why I think it's so interesting to remember to talk about the lianas, because you see you can benefit by starting as soon as you can, start growing ayahuasca plants.
Yeah.
The bushes is one thing, the alguna, but the other one is the Kyber the liana.
Yeah.
And that's really the one that is risking getting threatened here, because the way they cut it, the shamans, most of the shamans here are not on this ascension, rise of consciousness, frequency thing. They are basically more like trying to make an old business model out of a traditional thing that, by the way, has lost most of the knowledge of the mushroom kingdom as well. I believe it's the church intervention that has made that, and the bankers that has made sure that we forget about the mushroom kingdom, because a lot of the practices of finding cures is actually a kind of an extract of a diet. So when you read a good meal, we have representatives of many different kingdoms on the plate.
Sure.
So if we had that like an extract of all the good benefits and there was no poisoning in that, it would be a medical intervention.
I think some of my interests, primarily with mushrooms, has been more on the psilocybin front. I don't know as much about like the.
So that's why it's so interesting, because the giant puffball will support it, not just your muscle buildup, because it's so heavy in essential amino acids. It has more essential amino acids than non-essential amino acids. And you have to remember, amino acids is the elements we build up proteins with. So when our mitochondria, it makes not mitochondria, when our ribosomes created proteins, they do it by putting together amino acids. So I mean, you have a background in sports.
Athletics nutrition is primarily more of like my expertise, whereas like that's what I'm trying to bridge, like your knowledge, where it's more permaculture, naturopath, homeopathic, and the electromagnetic radiation.
Yeah, that you recognize, because now you have been so many different places that you certainly feel difference when you are exposed to heavy frequencies.
Yeah.
And you have become, and you actually told me that you once had.
Yeah, I had one back in the States, and I had to get rid of stuff when I was traveling, so unfortunately I had to get it away. I don't think mine was quite as nice as yours.
No, I think this one will serve you better. You probably didn't have the light indicator.
No.
Because that's also when you have to share the knowledge with others.
Yeah.
It becomes easier. But I mean, this is one of the ways, funny enough, not to lose your mind over it, because if you don't have an instrument, it will be like trying to make people believe in bacteria back in the days, not using a microscope at all. I mean, how would you explain people how important it is to wash your hands if you can't see any dirt on it, if you're not allowed to use a microscope, right? I mean, so we are in an age now where this is like the microscope, and people then, if you don't have an instrument to look at it, you can make your mind believe that you're going crazy. Just like in the days when they didn't believe in bacteria existed and people got sick, they gave it all kind of different excuses, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, but what I have here, so the reishi mushroom, Ganoderma lucidum, is actually very good against radiation.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
The reishi. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was looking for ways to kind of pull some of like the heavy metals out of your system, to pull some of the toxicity.
Right, so let's talk some about that now.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, because what you want to grow in your place, first of all, I'm just wanting to say that reishi you certainly want to grow because it grows there already. It grows excellent here in the jungle. And it's one of the most powerful medicines ever identified on this planet. Actually, after I got to understand it, because first of all, what you have to know about these kind of things, when you buy an extract to, let's say, an alternative store or a herb store or the internet, you only buy it in supplemental dosages. You're not allowed to sell it with medical dosages. So all the prescriptions, all the advices on these boxes that you buy are all under the dose of medical. And the way they then use the disclaimers also, well, if you want to use it in medical ways, you have to confront your doctor. And no doctor doctors are deliberately not educated in this. So you really can't ever get a doctor's advice. And if a doctor starts using one's knowledge and apply it to this natural realm, then you get delisted by your country.
Censorship is unreal.
Yeah.
So it's a problem.
So, but it's very easy to grow reishi and turkey tail here.
Okay.
And it grows on dead wood. So whenever you have like some piece of hardwood, stack it together in a place where it gets just a little sun and some hair and some wetness, and then you let it grow there.
There was like one. I was like, I'm trying to remember. Black Sheep was bringing up in one of his streams. It was like a penis mushroom, I guess, because it kind of grows like a penis, and it actually had that in the name of it. But it was one of the mushroom strains.
A phallus name, probably.
Yeah, something like that. But it had the highest concentration of psilocybin in that particular genre of mushroom, and that was one of the reasons why they were these guys were interested in it. It's different than the ones I had in the Philippines.
Is it the one that looks like an egg before it becomes?
Well, there's actually several types. I'd have to pull it up. I mean,
Really interesting. What I want to show you then, because when I was I took an education supplement after my medical, after I practiced some years. I supplemented with another education that is a team-based education, social entrepreneurship.
Okay.
It's called the Chaos Pilot. It also has a school in Switzerland.
okay.
But the point is was that I was supporting oyster mushrooms. I forgot to mention. Oyster mushrooms is excellent to grow yourself as well. And so whenever you have leftovers in coffee grounds and some tea and whatever, and it's diluted a bit, you know, it's not too strong. You can grow mushrooms in it, and you just mix it with dead wood and stuff, and then you can spread it. You can spread it on your ground. But excellent nutritional value and has medical properties as well. But what I wanted to show you then was, so I made, and I think I can show it here. I made like this slideshow, you know, as a preparation, because I was helping in this blue economy kind of thinking. We were making a startup in a city in Scandinavia where we then we took in organic wastes, organic coffee grounds from the local restaurants and cafes, and then we had like 2 growing containers, one that was simulating the summer underground or within the tree, like in darkness, certain temperature, and then a fall where it kind of blossoms up with the fruit. Remember also when we pick a mushroom like this is the fruit. The actual mushroom is here, right? So this is the mushroom. These are the fruits.
Yeah, I don't know if you could show that so much. You've kind of got it. Yeah, that shows up pretty well.
Yeah. So the mushroom. These are the fruits, and the mushrooms are the one on the ground. And you can compare it with an apple tree. When you pick an apple, and you have it, and then you don't say like you say. See, I picked all these mushrooms. You come home and you say I picked all these apple trees. Right? You say I picked this apple, which is the fruit. And so you come and I have this fruit that you pick from the mushroom. The mushroom is still back there, just as the sticks and the tree is still there. Right?
Yeah.
What I wanted to show here, and I guess you can see a bit, is what is really happening. So when we have the arteries of the body, these are from the lungs, they are following the same Fibonacci pattern as you generally have the order of a tree. And it turns out that the vessels in our body are following the same algorithm as the plant kingdom. Then when we come to the mushroom kingdom, it turns out that the way the myceliums run and create new centers, and then go out in a Fibonacci curve and then create new centers again, works very well on the horizontal plane. And while you have like the roots and the sticks, you have those like in the vertical plane of the plant kingdom, and then you have kind of on the horizontal plane you have the mushroom kingdom. And in similar ways you have the communication infrastructure of the body in the neural system, and that goes like across the plane. And then you have like all the vessels and everything that kind of runs like the plant kingdom.
Let me ask you this, because I'm really interested in this aspect. There was like something I heard somewhere where it was like the largest living organism in the world is actually a mushroom. That it's actually like this and the reason is because it has this large underground network that's all connected. So there was I forget the genre, but there was like a mushroom in the Northwest that it like was like the
neurons.
Yeah, like the structure was essentially like it was so connected. It was just so massive that that is actually what classified it as like the largest like living organism in the world.
It's called the honey mushroom, and I can show you it right here. It's actually
because mushrooms are fascinating because it's like the only living organism that it can also survive the vacuum of space. So there's a lot of theories behind, using it from a shaman perspective, and like people, claiming a lot of different things when they're under the influence of some of the effects of the mushrooms.
Right.
And it's something I'm not as experienced with. I'm looking to explore some more from a shaman perspective. But so many genres and.
For example, when you mentioned the honey fungus, it fills out most of the western United States, basically.
Yeah.
And it can both live on living species, which is why it's a bit parasitic, but it can also grow on dead woods. But what is actually interesting with it is, beside a few people can have an allergic reaction for one way or another. Usually more the case if you eat it raw, but most won't. So people can even eat it raw, even though usually a thing you usually say is always heat prepare your mushrooms as a general rule.
Okay.
But of course we already dry them. When you dry them, you also denaturate some of the things that might not be so well. But anyway, what I wanted to say is about the how do you say this word?
Amaryllia melia.
Yeah, melia.
Amaryllia melia.
Yeah. So that's
scientific name.
That's the Latin name for the honey fungus, the largest mushroom on the planet. And see, it's not because the fruit body that we pick is not so big. So it's the mycelium on the ground in all the dead woods, right? So what it can do is it improve vision and counteract ophthalmia and night blindness.
Yeah.
Reduce the symptoms of essential and renal hypertension and of neurasthenia.
Prevent respiratory and digestive tract conditions. Increases blood flow to the brain and heart without increasing blood pressure. Decreases heart rate. The mushrooms are amazing.
Reduces peripheral and coronary vascular resistance. So the interesting thing is that it can increase the blood flow to your brain and heart, but without raising your general blood pressure. And so when you put all these differences together, it turns out that that's only something you can usually reach if you have 3 different drugs that works in perfect synergy together. And this is all represented in just one mushroom that people they recognize as the biggest parasite of the planet. It's crazy. So we already have the medicine here, but if you went in and you ask for an extract of the honey fungus, it's almost impossible to find, even though you would leave most of the pharmaceutical industries of heart diseases, you would leave them with no business. So who really has the interest of keeping this knowledge down?
Sure.
It's obvious to me, but yeah, this one, it turns out that it actually, the fly agaric, is actually a medical mushroom, pretty great for other things, like for example ringworm, which is actually a mushroom infection, a yeast mushroom infection. But what it also can do is it can inhibit tumors. Many of them can. But what it used to be done, like now I'm representing the Viking kind of culture too, right? So the interesting note is to say that when they used to take it, if you take this for the psychic problems, mental problems, you would use it to reduce fear and to have a clearer internal perception of yourself. So if you can, I believe that what they would do before battle was to go into self-cleansing, so they would remove their self-blockages and their own fear, and so it's really an introspective process. Taking it, it's not violent to take at all. So it turns out that it actually removes fear, and it's not that you're supposed to go into the battle at the same time as you're taking it. If you want to struggle with that extra, you might have vomit and shit. So if you take it the night before, you will have a great sleep afterwards, and you will have no fear in the morning. And so we have to understand that our entire understanding of natural medicine has been highly suppressed and propagated by and diverted by the Roman Empire and all the interests that has blossomed out of that, right? And that's where we have the Freemasonry is from, that's where we have the Vatican from. And so most Orthodox religions, they won't advise you, they will actually try to scare you of using any of this. Here you have the giant puffball, in fresh, and you see many of which are active against gram-positive, negative bacteria and various fungi. It is used as a styptic to stop bleeding, coughs, sore throat,
Hoarseness.
and tumor.
Yeah.
But what it doesn't show is what I told you about the essential amino acids composition. So if we could grow this, and it would be a great protein powder for all kind of stuff instead of soya, for example.
Yeah.
Because soya is really not healthy. First of all, it has way too much glyphosate in it these days, and second of all, it is drained from its original natural richness, and lastly, it's way too abundant in tyramine. And tyramine is an amino acid that we don't really need, but it works like adrenaline to our body. So we have an amino acid that deliberately works as a neurotransmitter or as a transmitter. And so noradrenaline is the adrenaline one you have to the neural system. When you have an amino acid that acts like noradrenaline, the body has to protect itself to not getting over adrenaline activated. Right?
Okay.
And so what it does, all the mitochondria starts producing a lot of MAO inhibitor, the monoamine oxidase the monoamine oxidase, the one that you want to block when you take ayahuasca. But if you're eating like soya products and like conserved meats products and yeast products, you've got a lot of even fava beans and other beans have it, old like cheeses and unfiltered beers, and unfiltered wines, all this yeast, all the bread baked on yeast, all that yeast has a lot of tyramine in it. So all the time you're eating this, and also like conserved meats and heavy meats and everything, so all the time you're conserving a lot of tyramine, especially soya. You end up provoking your body to protect itself with a lot of MAO enzyme. And so it's actually a way to make yourself more depressed, because then when you're not loading your system with tyramine and they're not occupied, all this extra MAO enzyme, it ends up just depleting your natural neurotransmitter level when you sleep, because you have way too much of it. And so I mean, and the other thing then I would like to show is, for example, the abundance of what the reishi mushroom can do, and let's just like it's an
Anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, antibacterial. It's like anti-everything.
Yeah.
Anti-HIV.
Yeah.
Really?
No, it's been certainly researched.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay.
I mean, it doesn't say that it removes it completely, but it reduces it at more than 60.
Improves adrenocortisol function. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, it is liver protective. And it protects against ionizing radiation. If it protects against ionizing radiation, it will also protect you against non-ionized radiation.
Yeah.
And increases white blood cells and hemoglobin, increases productions of the communicators between the regulation of the immune response. So it's an immunoadaptogen. It helps the immune system adapt better to the stresses at hand. And that's really what you would call a natural adjuvant. The interesting thing is, in vaccines, for example, we have, after Second World War, most of the biodegradable adjuvants, the natural, the ones that would enhance your immune system response, got cancelled out with some that are non-biodegradable and that actually stays in your system to create. So you add them in because somewhere after the 50s, 60s, they started killing all the vaccines. So you would have no live component in it. And when you did that, then there is no inert, there is no intrinsic inflammatory or awakening modus in your injection. So, I mean, if you killed everything, the immune system will just take it as protein, as garbage. So you have to put something that makes a noise to attract the immune system to the injection site. So when you kill the entire thing, saying that that's an insurance policy, because then there is less chance that it'll reverse into its original state of an infection, right? If you have only weakened it and still kept it alive. But it turns out that that would be a more, the original keeping it a bit of alive would have made it biodegradable. Now when they killed it all, they have to put some inflammatories into it. So you provoke a response. It just turns out that when you use non-biodegradable stuff like highly reactive nano aluminum oxides, for example, which is the most abundant in most influenza vaccines and HPV vaccines, you know, and used as a standard. I mean, when you make them nano-sized, they're even more prone to cross the blood-brain barrier, and the same with the testicle blood barrier and the ovarian blood-brain barrier, which are the strongest tight junctions we have to protect us from pollution and toxicity in the blood, right? But these become attacked by these nanoparticles, and of course you can see a side stream of neurological inflammation problems and all kinds of disturbances. Imagine that this aluminum oxide, we don't have any studies that shows when they leave the body again. And they deliberately say it in the product regimens of the HPV vaccines. And yet still they are funded so enormously. It turns out the shiitake mushroom. The shiitake mushroom is a gourmet mushroom, respected, and you can earn loads of money selling it and dried. It's, you know, it's an immense amount. It doesn't weigh a lot when you take the water out of the mushrooms, right? So dried weight can be very profitable. But I'm just saying the shiitake mushrooms is actually also turned out in small pilot studies, and that might be not just an inhibitor, but actually a cure to the HPV virus. And that means that, for example, if you can eat it as much as you want. So if you can make an extraction and just make sure that it is at least 2 to 3 times higher than the normal recommended supplemental dose, then you know that you're getting closer to a medical dose. And then, for example, what I would suggest experimenting with would be like, for example, eating it for 1 to 2 or 3 weeks if you have an infection or you're worried. Eating it every day, either as an extract or putting it into your diet or doing both. It's an excellent tasting mushroom. It tastes even better than the what you call the oyster mushroom, right? But the interesting, and you can grow it. You can grow it on oak wood, dead oak wood also. And if you, but it eradicates HPV. So you can also, instead of making an alcohol extraction out of it, you can make a vinegar extraction out of it, and then soluble it with water to an extent where it gets the intimate pH value of 5.5, and then you can literally put the tampon into it, and you can put it up when you sleep, and then you will have a local treatment with the shiitake extract together with supplementing for those few weeks, and you will never have to worry about it. That's the most likely issue. It turns out that when you to the doctor come and you want to be examined, let's say your girlfriend wants to be examined by, does she have the human papilloma virus, for example? Because the only cure to it is either to cut it off or to get the vaccine. So, but when you get in and you get tested, it turns out the tests are made like a fork that you turn around twice in the infundibulum, the cervix zone. An area called a transformational zone, because that's where all the stem cells are, to decide whether to become like a square epithelium in the vagina or solunar epithelium in the uterus. And so having the test going on right there, where it then makes a microtron, and not just one time around the clock, but twice a time the clock. That's a way to incubate the entire area. If you only had like a small part in the cervix zone that was infected, and now you tested it by turning it twice around the clock with a huge hard brush, that you only have to do like this, so the patient never sees anything. Right? And then you end up, okay, if you didn't have anything, you were lucky, because then nothing got spread around. Right? So it's almost like the old witch burnings. Like you suppress the female body, right? Because what happens is, then after some testing, maybe you found something you're not really sure of, but you just made sure it got spread around. You make sure also that the patient or the citizen is lacking better sleep, because they need to wait at least 2 or 3 weeks to get the answer. So that time the Pathological Institute really carries out its name, because it turns out it's connected by the terms of pathos and logos. And when you connect these two, you get pathology. And that pathos, we know from drama, that is what drama, it's emotional drama. And that's exactly what the Institute is giving people. They're giving that emotional drama, so you're more likely to get into a dissonance of ease and therefore disease. And so after some time of testing HPV, then at some point you will have spread it so much that now you need a conversation, you need to cut it out. And then when you shorten the cervix, you also become a risk patient if you, for prematurely born carriers, right?
Yeah. Well, my battery is about to go here, so I mean, you know, this is, you know, like I like talking about these types of things. This has been, you know, my interest level. I know this is a little bit different than some of my crypto videos that I typically do, but you know, you're going to be leaving Peru here in a few days. We might have time to do another stream where we can talk a little bit more in depth about this. But
yeah,
like,
if there's any questions, also now,
be sure to leave them in the comment section below,
and we can catch it up.
Yeah, maybe you can respond to like some of the questions in the comment section. So, because I didn't get a chance, I know there was a few people, you know, asking about this. So there's a lot of really cool stuff when it comes to shrooms. A lot of different genres. It's an immense world. You have a huge foundation in which I'm thankful that I have the ability to kind of, you know, take in some of the knowledge that you have.
Yeah, and thank you for being open for it. You know, these times that's pretty rare as well.
Yeah. So, well, I'm going to cut my stream there before my phone dies, and appreciate you guys staying online, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Be looking out for tomorrow if you want to talk more about this, and we'll get another stream going.
Yes, and one last thing, when you are exposed to aluminum oxides and titanium oxides, and we can always come back on later where those sources are from, but it is the herb called horsetail.
Yeah.
So the herb horsetail can really be used. It has the ingredients of silica, and when you get silica organically bound, silicium organically bound, you can really uptake it, and it'll exchange with aluminum and titanium, so you can excrete it. It's actually been well researched, and you can even have effect of putting it into water, and people can get rid of aluminum. So that's one way to get rid of one of these inflammatory light metals.
Yeah.
Where you would normally never use it for cookware and what you know. Conservatives for boxing or whatever, you would never use it, right? You have zinc. Zinc is a stronger metal, and it's you can even use it for healing. So we already know that zinc is non-inflammatory, right? So why would we ever have that huge business for aluminum? Well, there's many ways. Coriander is one way to get rid of heavy metal, which is another, and then you have the stinging nettle, very known herb, very good of anti-inflammatory. And together with the CBD plant, you know, you can also get some crossover benefits. And with the reishi and the mushrooms in the mix, and the curcuma longa, you know, these kind of mixes using both extracts of the mushroom kingdom together with the herb kingdom create a very, very, very potent.
Well, I'm interested in coordinating with you and setting this up out on my property out in Iquitos. and kind of working towards having educating people about this, and also if people want to come out, that's the idea, the grand scheme of
There's
what
an
it has,
invitation
come out.
in between it all.
Yeah, and people can come out and experience this for themselves. So, anyways, I really appreciate you having me online. We'll do it again here soon, and thanks
Thank
a lot
you.
for staying online. Catch you guys the next